I'm recording this video in Boise's beautiful Morris Hill Cemetery, appropriate to my topic. Even if you're not from here, you probably understand why nobody living in the immediate area is allowed to be buried here. It's because they aren't dead yet. Days ago, I posted a video on Facebook and my website, GreenEra.Network, called Typhoid Mark and Mary, Fair Warning, in which I said I'd start videoing people not wearing masks where it's required. I haven't done that yet, and now realize my proposed retail approach is flawed for a number of reasons. If I had been shopping in Boise, where Mayor Lauren McLean cares enough about her citizens to mandate masks, I might have done that. I was hasty and frankly anxiety driven in my willingness to do anything if it might avert further unnecessary illness and death. I know it was possible that I might embarrass some negligent ignoramus enough that she or he might throw a punch, but I was willing to risk a scuffle in the service of the greater good. Fortunately, in a sense, but less so for safety's sake, I'm living in Nampa, where I assume Mayor Debbie Kling has priorities that supersede public safety in a pandemic. 2.5 weeks and 49 Idaho deaths later, I'm even more alarmed. But I've also had time to think more clearly and strategize. The purpose of this video is to convey to compassionate, science believing citizens the verbal tools and appropriate context they need to help protect themselves and those they love. Please realize that the courtesy and civility that normally lubricates the complicated machinery of human interaction absolutely must be set aside when you encounter a fool randomly swinging a machete on a crowded public sidewalk. In this pandemic, the damage and possible death could take weeks to fully manifest, but the threat is both real and greater. A person who refuses to socially distance and or wear a mask, especially in enclosed spaces, isn't swinging that metaphorical machete just at you. She or he is also endangering your family and friends. My dominant goal is to counteract what's clearly a wholesale American callous disregard for the disease and death piling up around us. I'll relate a few recent experiences because they are relevant. On 15 July 2020, Walmart announced that as of Monday the 20th, they would require customers to wear masks in all their stores nationwide. Other retailers had already instituted similar policies, but once Walmart smartened up, many more businesses followed suit. On Friday the 17th, I went to a Nampa Walmart. The national policy was not yet in effect, but they displayed a sign requiring customers to wear masks. I distinctly recall appreciating that I was entering a store ahead of the public safety curve, important in a city that even now, July 26th, doesn't mandate masks. Buying essentials should not be a health risk in a civilized country. Once past that sign, I was stunned. Two-thirds of the customers were not protecting their fellow consumers by masking. Since I was already aware and unaware of better alternatives, I shopped quickly and with some anxiety. Besides, I had just been in the dollar store down the street earlier, which is smaller and had many more unmasked nitwits per square yard. Until Dollar Tree's management pulls their collective heads out of the musty crevice they are death traps, I'll probably still have to risk because my budget is tight. At the Walmart cash register, it occurred to me that if paying for groceries is as required as is mask wearing, I shouldn't actually have to pay. That's theoretical. I've done stupid and occasionally illegal things, but I am not a thief. Do you notice that I'm naming names? Does that seem rude? When dangerous criminals are at large, possibly a threat to members of your community, is it ill-mannered to identify them by name? Local officials are accountable to citizens who elect them, especially if their policies are clearly irresponsible. Even though America's ill-conceived, in my opinion, electoral college has, in recent memory, interfered with the actual will of the people, it's still important to vote. Decisions made locally, especially now, determine your family's quality of life much more than federal policy. Here's an example. At the moment, The so-called leader of the free world has said he disagrees with CDC guidelines about how to safely open schools. How much credibility should one grant to a man with the mental and scientific acuity to publicly suggest injecting disinfectant might be a good idea? What's the worth of a person's opinion whose closest advisor is the imprecise they, as in, quote, they say that, end quote, any number of ignorant assertions? Your answer will depend on which is more important to you, political considerations or the health of your offspring and possibly their grandparents. I'm waiting for a reporter who attends these press conferences to ask the simple and obvious question, Mr. President, who exactly are they? You realize, of course, his standard response to facts he finds inconvenient is to label them fake news, without presenting any supporting evidence or even a counter argument. This works so well, other tyrants have adopted the same phrase and strategy. Fortunately, in America, local officials, including school boards, are making the decisions that will either protect our children or, if their priorities are askew, put them in harm's way. That's why I'm being specific, and also a good reason you should probably vote. You do know that school boards are elected too, right? On the other hand, I will be somewhat ambiguous while relating my recent visits to churches. What one specific congregation does may not reflect that of the whole denomination. In the past few weeks, while COVID-19 was already sweeping the country, I visited 11 churches that self-identified as some version of Jesus' people. All the services I attended were indoors. In all cases, I was in the 20% or smaller minority of those wearing masks. In every church, I witnessed people who clearly weren't going home together, embracing, shaking hands, even sometimes kissing on the lips or cheeks. These irresponsible behaviors, I imagine, is the reason Idaho's wise and competent Governor Brad Little closed the pubs here. But in a church, I assume you can't blame alcohol. It's impossible, given publicly funded education, that they are all ignorant of science and biology. It's almost as unlikely that none of them are aware that an airborne persistent pathogen is being spread and that enclosed spaces are specifically hazardous. Ruling those two possibilities out, what's left? It makes me sad to say the only conclusion I can reach is that to them, love thy neighbor must mean something different than I think it means. The meaning of pro-life and family values must have an extremely narrow interpretation. It's clear that our most vulnerable citizens are elderly and minorities. Given my own observations, I assume their safety is of little concern to the so-called Christians with whom I've recently come into contact. I'd like to point out that I'm very familiar with the four Gospels. Jesus healed lepers, but at no time did he advocate that the practice of keeping them in colonies and away from healthier folks was a violation of their rights, and that they should be free to mix with the population at large. My name is Jim McGill, and I live in a philosophical construct I call the Green Era, citizen of a nation that's quickly becoming an epidemiological wasteland. Due to political considerations, compared to most of our planet, I'm also living in what's essentially a leper colony.